Welcome, friends, to another exciting episode of A VGM Journey, and I'm your host, The Messenger. The track that we're playing into today's show is the title theme from Game & Watch Gallery 2. It was composed by Noriko Nishizaka, Yoko Mizuta, and Saburo Sasaki. We are continuing our little mini-series of focus on the Game & Watch Gallery series, this time talking about Game & Watch Gallery 2. Definitely bringing some really good tracks to you guys, and I say let's kick things off with Parachute from Game & Watch Gallery 2. That track that you just listened to, that was Parachute from Game & Watch Gallery 2. Parachute is a cool little game where you're a guy on a rowboat who is trying to catch people that are falling from the sky on parachutes. And the modern version is not that much different, though you are playing as Mario, who's trying to catch Toads, Yoshis, and for some reason, multiple Donkey Kong Juniors. And what's so weird to me is the song is pretty catchy, though I get a different vibe of maybe having a good day on the beach instead of trying to save your friends from falling into the ocean. And the gameplay does get pretty frantic really fast when you're trying to juggle the different parachuters. And similar to Fire from the first Game & Watch Gallery, the various different characters have different weights and that their falling speed is different from one character to another, so you have to determine who you have to catch first. But it's definitely a fun one. We're going to move on to our next track, and this time this is Helmet, specifically level 1, and once again, this is from Game & Watch Gallery 2. That track that you guys just listened to, that was Helmet Level 1 from the game Game & Watch Gallery 2. Helmet is a really cool game where you are this construction worker and you're trying to make your way from the building to the left to the shed on the right while avoiding falling tools. And you get points for avoiding the tools, but also making it to the shed. And you just repeat the process over and over again. And the modern version of Helmet is also really cool, where you play as Mario and you have to make it from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen with the added gameplay mechanics of the P switch popping up every time you go through, and when you hit it, coins pop up, and that you can grab the coins for bonus points. However, there is a risk reward mechanic with this, and that for every coin that you grab in that little run, you get heavier and slower. So you have to determine if the coins are even worth grabbing or not. Most of the time, I'd grab them, but it definitely adds a little something to it. And what's really cool too is that for every 500 points that you get, you go to a different level, and that it also has its own song too, which is pretty neat. And another cool thing about the modern version of Helmet too is that you can also play as Wario, but only if you play Helmet once and you get a score less than 100 and then immediately try again. You could play as Wario. So you have to kind of suck, but it's still cool. I think we should move on to our next track, and I like this one quite a bit. This is Chef from Game & Watch Gallery 2. That track that you just listened to, that was Chef from the game Game & Watch Gallery 2. Chef is a game where you play as a chef who has to juggle food with his frying pan and make sure that they don't hit the ground. In the easy mode, it's 3, but in the hard mode, it's 4. And on the left side of the screen, there's a cat that he'll occasionally stick a fork out and catch one of the food, which may or may not help you out with the juggling. And in the modern version of Chef, you play as Princess Peach, who has to juggle the food while the Mario Brothers throw the food at her, and also she has to feed a Yoshi that follows her around. It's quite a bit different than the original, where you're actually trying to cook the food and feed Yoshi, but you can overdo it and burn the food. And if you give Yoshi any of the burnt food, then he reverts back down to little Yoshi. But if you successfully give him, I would say about 5 cooked meals in a row, he pops out an egg. And as you keep, doing a good job, the egg will eventually hatch and you'll get bonus points. In the easy mode, Luigi is the only one that's throwing the food, but in hard mode, both of the Mario Brothers are throwing food, and that the food will occasionally be flipped in angles. So it's not just a straight up and down. It could move from one position to another. So you have to really juggle the food. And I feel like this is the first Game & Watch Gallery remake game where it changes the gameplay quite a bit compared to the original. It seems like with the previous games, it's fundamentally the same, but with a little bit of added gameplay. But I just feel like the difference between the classic version and the modern version, like it's kind of like a new game in a way. And actually, the next track that we're going to play, that game is actually quite a bit different from the classic version to the modern version, and that is Vermin. Once again, it's from Game & Watch Gallery 2. That track that you just heard, that was Vermin from Game & Watch Gallery 2. In Vermin, you play as a guy with really long arms for some reason, and he has to protect his garden from moles. And when they pop up, you have to hit them with your long hammer arms. And in a way, it's pretty much like whack-a-mole. But in the modern version of Vermin, you play as a Yoshi who is trying to protect his eggs from various different enemies like Fly Guys, Koopa Paratroopas, and even Boo Buddies. And while the classic version, you're just going left and right, in the modern version, you're going around in a circle, so enemies are coming from all different directions. And the game is over when one of your 6 eggs are broken, but for every 200 points that you get, all the eggs that haven't taken any damage actually hatch, and you get bonus points. And I think the most ironic thing about the modern version of Vermin is that every 200 or so points, a Monty Mole pops up and gives you a heart, and that it will actually recover a little bit of damage to your eggs. And I don't know, I just find that really funny. We're going to move on to my favorite game from Game & Watch Gallery 2, and that is Donkey Kong. track that you just heard, that was Donkey Kong from the game Game & Watch Gallery 2. Donkey Kong is a very interesting Game & Watch game where it's fundamentally the same as the arcade original, where you play as Mario and you have to make your way to the top of the screen. And you're jumping over barrels and the works. However, you have to turn on this crane at the top and you have to jump up and grab it. And once you do that, you get some points. And you just do that over and over again. So it plays similar, but it's also very different. And that the modern version also goes for this kind of style where you play as Mario and you have to rescue Princess Peach from Donkey Kong, and that you're starting from the bottom and you're working your way to the top. You have to activate a switch and then make your way to this door, which will actually take out these platforms and stuff that Donkey Kong is standing on. And I think after doing that 5 times, he falls down. But what's really cool about the modern version is that every time you do that, you go to a different level. And that the first level, it's in a factory. Then the second one, you're in a forest area with a waterfall. And then the third area is the sky. And you go through the 3 levels and then you start again. And you just keep going until you get hit 3 times. One little nitpick that I have with the modern version is that the Donkey Kong sprite looks kind of funny looking, and that even though this was a post Donkey Kong Country game, because Game & Watch Gallery 2 came out in 1998, it does not have the rare design. And he looks a little chunky and a little goofy looking, so I thought to point that out just because. And that's gonna just about do it for the show. If you like what you've been listening to, have your friends check out the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify maybe, if the show hasn't been taken down already. You could check it out on YouTube, and you could also check it out on TerraPlayer, which is the home for various different video game and video game music podcasts. You can email the show at vgmjourney@yahoo.com, and you could also check us out on both X and Blue Sky at vgmjourney. We also have a Discord server for the show, which I will provide a link for that in the show notes, where you could hang out with your fellow VGM journeymen and talk about games, music, and even look at some cool art. I'm also going to play things out with one more track, and this was an unlockable game where after getting so many points in the other games, you can unlock both the classic version and modern version of Ball. And it is a simple little game where you're juggling balls. And the song is really cool. For the millionth time, I'm telling you guys, it's from Game & Watch Gallery 2. So have a good one, everyone.